Hi, this is my video review for Savage Worlds Deluxe. Savage Worlds Deluxe is more of a role-playing game system rather than just a role-playing game, because it allows you to create the type of game you want to play. You could create a sci-fi setting or maybe a fantasy setting. Well, let's talk about the physical characteristics of the book. It's a hardcover and it's pretty sturdy, and it has some pretty good illustrations. Some of them are not very good, but most of them are pretty decent. And well, let's talk about the character creation. Character creation starts in a pretty standard way, generating your attributes like strength, agility, toughness, and stuff like that. And then you generate edges and hindrances. Edges are a bit like feats in Pathfinder. They give you advantages in combat and diplomatic situations. They feel like special moves or bonuses that you can employ in a specific situation. And hindrances are kind of like character flaws that will give you a disadvantage in specific situations. But by taking hindrances, you may take additional edges and other bonuses. You also determine your gear and your background details, so you don't feel you're just playing a normal playing piece. You really feel like you're fleshing a character. And the book gives you a lot of character archetypes, so you can find the right one for you. For example, if you want to create a pilot, even if it's a sci-fi setting or maybe a World War II scenario, they give you pilot statistics here, and you just have to do some minor modifications so you can use your character in any setting you want. The game also comes with a lot of good advice to create your own races for fantasy settings, horror, etc. You can create dwarves, catfolk, half orcs, saurians, half elves. It's a very good book because it really gives you a lot of options in just one single thin tome. You can create so many things with it. And then, after creating your character, the book introduces you to the style of play. Well, first they give you a good selection of weapons and armor and things like that, but it's a pretty good list. But I think they could have given a bit more sci-fi stuff. A lot of it is more like for fantasy games or maybe modern games, but I think they could have added a bit more sci-fi and futuristic things. You also get vehicles, and that's another a bit disappointing part of the book, because they give you a lot of World War II era planes, some modern military aircraft, but they don't give you space shuttles or spaceships. It's like the book has a strange aversion to giving you materials to create futuristic settings. I don't know why they did that. Well, the game rules are very streamlined, they're very simple. There are some small complex aspects to them, but most of them are really easy to learn. You use the 7 classical polyhedral die, and the dice, you roll them, and they are called explosive dice in this game because, for example, if you roll an 8-sided die and you roll an 8, you roll it again, and if you get another 8, you roll it again, and you start adding the numbers. And this allows you to succeed at different tests, usually by rolling a 4 or better. And this is the same mechanic you will use for attacking, for trying to hack into a computer, trying to climb a mountain. All of it is handled that way. So it's and if your character, because your character is a bit more powerful or a cut above the rest, he also gets a 6-sided die called the wild die. The wild die, you roll it with your standard dice if you want to make a check or whatever, and this die may give you a better result. For example, if you rolled a 10-sided die and you rolled your wild die, maybe you got a 2 on your 10-sided die, but thanks to your wild die that came out as for example as a 5 or a 6, maybe you succeeded on a test thanks to it. But of course there are also some kind of like critical failures or fumbles. If you get 1 in both dice, There are also other things that make playing easier. They are called bennies. Bennies are like fate points, hero points, anything that gives you a chance to reroll or escape certain death. That's what bennies are. And you start spending them, and the game master will give them back to you if you succeed at certain objectives, if you're a good role player, if you do something else for the group. For example, you buy a pizza for the game night and things like that. And the combat is pretty standard in this game. You roll initiative. Oh, but this is important. Initiative in this game is determined by a deck of normal playing cards. You, depending on the card you draw, it determines if you are going first or last. And if you draw a joker, you get a special bonus to your attacks or your actions. And Savage Worlds is a game created to be played with miniatures and a good gaming table, but you can also play it in a very abstract way. But I think it works a lot better if you use miniatures. It has that kind of like a light war game feel to it. Injuries in this game are not handled as hit points. They are handled more like phases or steps. For example, if you get hit once, you start getting injured, and you are less efficient or successful in your actions. You start getting penalties, and it's really hard to die in this game because usually all the characters are very tough, and adding to that the wild eye and the Benny, you even can even make a toughness roll to see if you can escape a wound or certain death. So it's a game for players who enjoy low mortality rate. And you also have a lot of special tactics to use in combat, like for example using full auto with a automatic fire gun, or maybe you want to use a suppressing fire, or maybe you want to focus completely on defense. And you may also use improvised weapons, and I think this is the more complex part of the gaming system, the game system of this Savage Worlds book, that the beginner players will have to have a list with all the tactics you can employ in combat, or they are not going to be sure of exactly what they can do with their characters. But it's a minor thing. You also have a lot of rules detailing things like exhaustion or horror checks for when the player characters face some horrible creature like a ghost or some type of horrible vampire, and this may give them certain penalties, or maybe even cause them a heart attack at the worst case scenario. There are also there's also a chapter explaining hazards like cold, disease, drowning, and the rules how to deal with them, how to avoid them. There are also rules for mass battles, and they are very simple, and they are very handy because sometimes you want to represent those epic confrontations between two armies, those clashes that define everything, and this game gives you a pretty simple system so you can resolve those situations and continue with a more individual type of game. You also get a lot of optional setting rules and modifying if you want critical failures, if you want gritty damage, so your character dies more frequently and you have to generate other character, or maybe resurrect him through some spell. So it's a very customizable game overall. The vehicle rules are also very good. I think they simplify a lot of things, and they resolve most things with simple checks that anybody can learn. And the powers, which are spells, psychic abilities, weird science gadgets, all are also handled fairly easy. You just make a check, and you see if it succeeds, the power has an effect, and you spend a certain amount of points, kind of like spell points, for example. And you can decorate each power according to the setting. For example, if you are playing a high fantasy setting, some spells you can use the trappings for them to look like fireballs, or maybe cyclones or earthquakes. But if you are playing in a horror game, you may decorate the spells with something ghastly, as if they came out of a book of vile black magic, or if you're in a sci-fi setting, you can modify all the powers and spells so they look like psychic powers or kind of like Jedi powers. So more customization in that aspect of the game. There's also a good game mastering chapter telling you how to deal with adventures, campaigns, scenarios, and they talk about a bit of the format they use for scenarios, which are called plot point campaigns, which are like small one-shot scenarios, but that may be tied together to form a continuity or a campaign. The game also contains a bestiary, a fairly decent bestiary. It doesn't have a lot of monsters, but it has enough for you to play in a variety of settings. And this is a strange thing. You have a mech, a sentinel for a sci-fi or futuristic setting. And I don't understand why they included a futuristic enemy, but they include almost no futuristic vehicles or sci-fi vehicles like spaceships and space shuttles and all that. And at the end of the book, there are various one-sheet adventures or one-shot scenarios, so you can give your players a sample of what Savage Worlds has to offer. They give you a horror scenario, a fantasy scenario, a sci-fi scenario, and like a modern scenario. It's pretty good overall. And at the end of the book, you have all these charts and tables that I recommend you scan and print them so you have them handy so when you are playing the game. And also some large templates, as you can see here, so you can measure the effects and distances with ease. And let me show you a bit more of the illustrations, because some of them are really pretty nice. Like for example this medieval landscape over here, or this one that looks pretty. Looks pretty like Indiana Jones, like adventuring in the desert and things like that. Well, let me give you my opinion about Savage Worlds. I think it succeeds in the way it allows you to create a lot of great settings and stories. You can create and play any type of scenario, game and character you can think of. The rules are pretty easy to customize, to modify and to play, but there are also some negatives because of its generic nature, that it's not defined in a specific theme or specific rules. The game could feel a bit repetitive even if you play different scenarios, because for example you are always rolling dice for almost everything, rolling dice and repeating those rolls because of the exploding dice feature. And sometimes you get a bit tired of rolling and rolling. You really need a good game master to pace things a little so that it's not always rolling dice. And also I am a bit disappointed that they didn't include more futuristic vehicles and futuristic enemies. They gear the book more like for modern and fantasy and a bit of horror role playing, but they left the sci-fi aspect or futuristic aspect out of it almost entirely. Another thing that will probably bother some game masters is that they don't give you a clear way of balancing the encounters against the different enemies. This is understandable in old school RPGs. The players have to take a risk when they face different enemies and traps, but this game is presented a bit like a modern school type of game, but they want you to take an old school approach when facing the different challenges. They give you some guidelines, but they are not really that useful. And another thing, the bennies and the exploding dice again, this gives a lot of advantage to the player. So for example, a dungeon master or game master will have a bit of trouble trying to balance what exactly is challenging and what exactly is too much. If his players start winning all the battles, he may think, oh, I need to give them a stronger foe to fight against, or maybe attack them with a lot more enemies. And sometimes he doesn't measure the exact degree of danger and throws an overwhelming force against the players, and then he kills them just like that. And the greedy rules are also take a bit to adjust to, because sometimes the players get really lucky on their rolls, but when they fail, they die very, very fast. And so overall, it's a good book. It's a good game. Just keep in mind that it has some flaws, but because this is such a customizable system, it's like a doorway to playing all sorts of exciting things. In my future videos, I'm going to review a few settings that you can play with this Savage Worlds book, and then you'll see what I mean when it has a lot of possibilities and potential. Well, thanks for watching my review. If you have any comments, please type them down. I will read them. See you later.